All right. So welcome to everybody. I see people are starting to trickle in. If you're here for the Interviewing in the Hot Seat Career Center program, you are in the right place, as you can see from your screen. My name is Scott. I just wanted to let you all know we're going to take a few minutes here, allow everyone to kind of show up who's going to attend. So just sit tight for us for a couple minutes, and we'll be back to get things started in another 2 to 3 minutes or so. Welcome and thanks for being here. So I know there's some people who just came in. I just want to let you know we're going to take a few minutes, allow everybody to arrive. So just sit tight. We'll get things rocking and rolling in the next couple of minutes. Thanks for being here, and we'll start probably around 7:03-ish. Still seeing those numbers trickle up a little bit, so we definitely want to hold off. So it looks like there's a few more people who've joined. Just a kind of last announcement before we get going. Just going to give another minute or so. Allow everybody who wants to attend tonight, allow them the time to get in and get settled. So we'll start in the next minute or so. So just sit tight for another minute and we'll get going. Thanks for your patience. For your awareness, my colleague Alan Tracy just shared in the chat, if you'd like to view it, our guidelines for interaction. And the special thing to note in there is the fact that we have a captioning feature for anybody who'd like to use it. However, you do have to turn it on in your control bar in order for that to go live. But that is a nice feature in case you're having any difficulty with hearing via the audio. So please be aware of that, but take a second to take a look at our guidelines for interaction overall. All right. So I think at this point, we will go ahead and get started. So some of you might have heard me say this already, but my name is Scott Malloy. I'm a senior career advisor at the RISD Career Center. I'm also joined by my other colleagues from the RISD Career Center tonight, who you can see on your screens, Ellen Tracy, Anira Garcia Colon, and Karen Harris. So if you're here tonight, you're probably wondering what you can do to be successful in your next interview for an internship, for a job, or another career opportunity. Well, tonight you're in luck. You will get to watch 2 live mock interviews to help you gain insight into the interview experience. You'll learn what kinds of questions to ask. You'll learn what kinds of questions employers ask, how students can talk about their experiences, and even how they share their creative work. We are really, really lucky tonight to be joined by two amazing employers who are going to help us by participating in these live mock interviews this evening. So I want to especially thank our employers for the evening, Galen Bowie, who is an associate at Robert A.M. Stern Architects, and Alexandra Potterack, who is an associate educator at our very own RISD Museum. Thank you both for participating this evening. I also want to thank our two very talented and very brave students, Isa Larco, who is a senior in painting at RISD, and Alana Cavalcanti, who is a grad student in interior architecture. And I want to thank them for being in the hot seat. That's definitely no easy thing to do, and we really appreciate their willingness to do it. So just to kind of lay out the structure for tonight, it's going to be pretty straightforward. So each mock interview will be about 15 to 20 minutes in length. We'll start with one, this will be Galen and Alana, that will be a little bit more architectural and design focused as far as the content of the interview. And we're going to follow that one with one that is more museum and fine arts leaning, and that's going to be Isa and Alexandra. Once both interviews are over, we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So we really encourage and welcome you all to submit your questions about interviewing throughout, as well as respond or ask questions about what you saw tonight in the mock interviews. So you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to do that. And at the end, we'll take a look at those questions, and all of our participants, as well as staff members from the Career Center, will have the chance to respond with their thoughts to your questions. So definitely take advantage and feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask your questions as things go along. With that, I think we will just go ahead and get things started. So I will hand things over to our first interviewers, Galen and Alana. Take it away, and thanks again so much.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Alana.
So my name is Alana Cavalcanti. I was born and raised in Brazil, where I'm currently Zooming you from. So a little bit of my professional experience. Currently, I am a graduate student at RISD, but I worked for 3 years at Meyer Davis in New York City, which is a boutique design firm that specializes in hospitality and residential work. I was part of the team of these 3 projects, as you can see: Dream Hotel Doha, One Barangaroo, which is a Crown Resort in Sydney, Australia, and One Manhattan Square in New York City, which is a mixed-use building with a focus on the amenities in public spaces. I was working on the FF&E team, writing specifications and drawing design intents for the majority of the furniture that was specified for these projects. Meyer Davis' goal is to be able to communicate this user experience and enhancing the idea of curated design for the user. So weaving bold design moves, but really focusing how the user will experience the spaces. Those are concepts that I believe as a professional and that I try to include in my work. So I'm going to start with my undergraduate work. This was my capstone thesis of when I was at the Savannah College of Art and Design for my undergrad. Before COVID, we were all the time in airports, and we were constantly in these spaces dwelling that didn't mean much for the community. So I wanted to create a space that you would actually learn something about the environment, a contemporary cultural center in these airports. So the whole idea started with the city I was born and raised with. So not only I have an emotional attachment to it, it's the 3rd largest city in Brazil, and it's also known because of their tourist attraction, and it's really known for being a place to go for summer. So I wanted to make sure that this energy that you felt in the city was also felt and communicated in this cultural center. So my whole concept started with the point of the possibility of influencing. Even though every passenger has its own needs, I understood that not everybody would be able to experience this space, but I wanted to create a point of possibility to inform or just to trigger a interesting memory for this space. I wanted to have really defined principles of design in order to not only drive my ideas, but to make sure that if there was a second or third project in this space, they will all follow the same design language. A little bit of my design process, as you can see, I'm a really big proponent of sketching, so I always keep a sketchbook, and I believed that the best design is a design that is layered. So you can see on the bottom a couple of wireframes that I took from, in this case, Revit, that I was able to add trace paper, not only to explore materiality, but to understand what could be done to the space and how it would actually feel before communicating into the software. So this idea of blending the physical work and the digital work together, it's something that I'm always doing and looking forward in projects. I decided to include this project in kind of a hallway, but I wanted to have a design feature that it connected to. As you can see, it's right after the security checkpoint, and the program itself follows a little bit of a museum kind of idea, having a coffee shop, a gift shop, and an exhibition area. I designed this ceiling feature that was inspired by an arrow. I created a gradient with it, but I also changed the spacing between these fixtures in order to create a tenser environment as you got closer to your gate. And I also designed the whole exhibition space. After researching the passengers' needs, I wanted to make sure that they have the opportunity to create like a love letter to the city, but also learn about different things like the people that influenced the city and state or were influenced by the way that they communicate, the vocabulary and the stories that are told. I also created a big wall that combined the interactive screens that we're all used to, but also cabinets that you're able to open and physically explore, and also some movement-based screens in order to call people into the space. As you can see on your right, these are the movement-based screens. So right after you're leaving security checkpoint, this kind of artwork is created by movement and by people being there. And then on the left, you can see a little bit of the coffee shop where the name is de grão em grão, which is from grain to grain, also reassuring this idea of point of possibility. The second project I want to show you is the Nevelson. It is still a work in progress, but I thought it communicated not only of how my design ideas developed throughout time, but how my work experience influenced them. The Nevelson is an artistic creative hub in Providence, inspired by Louise Nevelson. She's known for these grand assemblage pieces that are monochromatic and all painted in black. So I wanted to understand her essence, not only her artwork. By researching her artwork, I realized that there are three main themes that work throughout: the monumental and the sculpture aspect, the rhythm of geometry in these artworks in each of these frames, but also the sense of exploration. With that being said, I decided to create a program that kind of combined all of it together. So you would walk into a lobby gallery space, and then you would have a more private studio, workspace, and office and library. But then you would have this reveal of a speakeasy, something that is not expected, but really communicates to the city of New York, where Louise Nevelson did the majority of her artwork and was in love with. But it's a different way in a program to create a sense of exploration. With that, even though she is really known for her artwork with these sculptures, what really fascinated me was the use of lithographs. So you can see on the top, I zoomed in these pieces and kind of started abstracting them. And then I started to see common themes like tension and intersection. And by overlaying them, it kind of gave me the guidelines for what my ground floor and my first floor would be. As you can see here in the floor plans, the first floor is something really public with the lobby and gallery workspace area, and then the reveal of the speakeasy. But the second floor, it's something more private for the resident that would be living there. It's also really like New York kind of a studio apartment where you could do all in there, but it's still connected to this whole idea of the workspace in the gallery. So it's an abstraction of her artwork within the plan. And then here, last but not least, are a couple of grand billwork pieces that I created. I wanted them to communicate different things within her artwork. So the one in the speakeasy, you can see it plays around with shadows, the use of mirror in the back, but also with the idea that each frame is different, but it creates a holistic composition. while the millwork display in the workplace, it plays around with the idea of using different materials within the same color and texture, but it still plays with the idea of proportion and understanding that it could be used for display and also storage. So these two were the ideas that I took from her and then I implemented into the millwork. This is my presentation for today, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Alana. That was great. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with me your portfolio and your work. I think you presented very clearly and spoke very poignantly about the work that you showed today, both your academic as well as your professional work before grad.
Thank you.
school. So thank you for that. And I think it was very thought-provoking and very interesting. And I have to say, just sort of flat out, your graphics are very strong. And so we do like that and look
Thank you.
for that at Ramza. In addition, I would also say that hand sketching is something that is very important to us at Ramza, as well as the digital. And so I liked how you spoke about that in your work and how the hand sketch gets translated is really very important. As a matter of fact, is most of what we do at Ramza. So I thought the way in which you spoke about how you blend them together already sort of naturally in your work is something that we would be very interested here at Ramza. So I have a few questions for you. First being, as I was able to look at your resume when you submitted it in advance of this, and it said that you were part of the IIDA, and so I wanted to know if you could talk just a little bit about that and your experience there.
Yes, I was a part of the IIDA and the ASID because I wanted to understand this transition between the undergraduate degree or academic work that I was getting and then how it could be translated within the professional world. I also wanted to create a way to connect with the students that were studying the same topic and would actually work in the field with me. Even though we might not be from the same grade level, I wanted to see how we could all strive and be advocates for this profession. I also believe it gave me the opportunity to go to conferences where I would open my mind of what I wanted to do. Maybe my idea in the beginning wasn't to do hospitality itself, but it showed me what the depth of hospitality is and what actually someone does when specifying things. So it was a great resource and opportunity, not only to learn, but to connect.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. In addition, I thought maybe you can touch a bit on your work experience at Myers Davis. And I think that would be great to understand the projects you work on that you showed were pretty great. And I would want to know what your role was on those projects that you worked on and what you did on any one of them.
So I worked on the FF&E team for all the projects. For One Manhattan Square, the project was built. It was a long project for about 5 years, and they were just re-specifying the furniture. So I was able to do that while designing all the design intent. So making sure the shop drawings were picked up, and then also understanding delivery dates and how things would work. For Crown Resorts and for Doha, Dream Doha, I was able to work on the project for Crown for 3 years, while for Doha for 1.5 years. And as you know, these projects are really long, so you're really involved in every step of the process. So I was lucky to, even though I wasn't there from the first immediate concept, I was there for several iterations of every furniture piece, and even writing the specifications, seeing VE, how it would work, and understanding the grand scheme of the process.
Great. Very important to understand and to have experience, because that is very much the way in which we work, understanding the design intent and the realities of how something might actually have to adjust and change to be built.
Exactly.
And all of that. So when you hear that, you know, you're writing specifications and sort of digging into those sort of nitty gritty, I think that's very, you know, appropriate. And it's something that we experience on a daily basis. And I think part of our challenge as designers are things to sort of find a way in which to sort of overcome those obstacles and put forth even a stronger idea based on the challenges and constraints. For example, budget or
Exactly.
constraint in space or something like that. So that's important to me, and that you were able to do that in advance of going back to school for grad is some really good
Yes.
experience. So thank you for sharing that. Do you have any questions for me?
I actually have two questions. One, even though COVID existed, what would be the day-to-day of a role of an intern at Virginia designer, someone at entry level in your firm?
Okay. Well, I think what's really important to us at Ramsey is this collaboration, the sense of getting together and sharing ideas. So you would definitely have meetings with the team, and you would also be meeting directly and one-on-one with the design director and design lead of the specific project that you're assigned. And a lot of the work would be based on, you know, understanding what the client's brief is and discussing that. Sketching, certainly some quick sketches and ideas of initial concepts, whether it's space planning, layout, and or further down the road details, specific architectural intern, sort of interior architecture for the various things. For example, if you're working on a lobby and you want to do initial space planning, different layouts for what you would have in the room versus, you know, a millwork detail of say a cabinet or a bookshelf or whatever might be within the space. I think you get the opportunity to work on various aspects, from the very big broad overview, big picture, right down into the very small details. In addition to that, we do have reviews with Bob Stern and as the partner in charge, and just to get them up to date. So I think one thing that is great about being where we are at Ramsey is that we basically engage everyone at all levels. And so you have the opportunity to speak with everyone regardless and present. And if you have a good idea, whatever it is, you have the opportunity to suggest that. And we basically encourage that. So that's sort of some of what you would be doing. In initial, I would say a lot of it would be also doing a lot of the sort of source work. So sourcing the various materials, working and talking on a daily basis with the vendors and the various consultants that you might be consulting with, whether it's an art consultant, whether it's a fabricator. A lot of that work is done right off the bat. And it's something that we encourage and we like to give more sort of a junior interior designers the opportunity to do, because that makes you be well-rounded.
I agree. And then the next question is about the firm and its sense of community. Like, what exactly is the firm's culture, and how do it change throughout COVID maybe, and like what are the goals to keep us excited about Ramsey?
Okay. So thank you for that question. And we've been working really hard at this. We're still working remotely, and but some people go into the office, kind of what we were just talking about, specifically to review materials and samples that are being sent in that we need to review in context with the rest of what's going on in the project and the design intent, and then sending samples out to the client. So we are doing a bit of both, but still the majority remotely. We sort of have group sessions and meetings, so we're still very collaborative, albeit remotely. We have check-ins with the project team, as well as the different studios that we have. There have about 8 different studios led by really talented designers and managers, senior partners at the firm. And then within that, we sort of meet collectively as a group on the, I would say, the overall team studio structure, and then in our smaller project teams. And we do various things, and we're fortunate enough to have pretty much everything in-house, from the architecture side, exterior, as well as interior architecture, as well as interior design and FF&E, just specialty, as well as landscape design. So we get ourselves together depending on the project and where we are in a particular phase, and we all meet as a group. So we will meet with our interior designers that are assigned to the projects we're working on. We'll have group sessions there with the architecture team for the exterior, because again, interior affects exterior. We need to be communicating, right, to see how things might change. on the exterior versus what's going on in the interior, the layout in the space. We might say, oh, well, can you guys move the window here? And just so allows the interior space to work that much better. So we have a lot of coordination and a lot of, I would say, collaboration across the different design disciplines within the office. So we're really very, I would say, interactive, engaging. In addition to that, we have several what we would call presentations. We had one today in our Ramsey Town Hall of the different projects that others are working on. So even though it may not be what you are specifically working on, you get the opportunity to see what others are working on in the house studios, single family residential versus more institutional and academic work versus even external communications. Our marketing department showed a book that they worked on with one of the teams that were working projects in Asia. They're going to publish a book on the work that they did in their 10 years with them. So we do have a very, I would say, culture that really focuses on sharing and being more sort of together in the sharing of the various projects and information. So I think that is one thing that we really strive and work hard to accomplish, especially for staff joining us. And with that, I can actually show you a little bit that will give you
That'd be great.
more. I'll try to share my screen and take you through a little bit. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll just give you a little overview of what we do, and then I think that might speak to the culture as well. So we'd like to say at Ramsey, we can design, and we love to design anything from towns to tabletops. So you'll see here a myriad of images from our town planning in the upper left, which is in Celebration, Florida, to multifamily residential on the right-hand side, 15 Central Park West, to academic work. You'll see the Jacksonville Library, but we do right down to sort of the smaller detail and scale, where you'll see on the bottom right, product design, where we did a site lighting for a planning project we were working on, as well as the furniture, which is what you're sort of focused on and you're talking about. We get the opportunity to do all of that. In the center of the image, you'll see a cultural institution and a museum that we had worked on. Now it was the Museum for African Art, is now the Africa Center, and it was sort of used just recently. The facade became a canvas for an inaugural exhibit for the Black Lives Matter and an homage to those that had died and passed. We also do single family houses in the bottom middle, where this is where the practice actually started. Bob Stern and the partners worked on single family houses. And then the work, academic work here on the left, the Spangler Center at Harvard, it sort of grew out of that work. Again, I had mentioned we do landscape architecture as well, and that's in-house. So we really try to say not only the exterior sort of building, but also the exterior spaces that we create. And it's something that we work hard to do, whether it's a private residence or whether it's a planning project you'll see on the bottom right in Xiamen, China, as well as sort of a multifamily, more urban project in 15 Central Park West on the west side here. And in addition to exterior work and landscape work, we move inside. We do a lot of our interior design work for, again, corporate interiors in the upper left, for single family private residences on the upper right, as well as for the multifamily residential, which I spoke about, something that you would definitely be working on for one of our buildings, the lobbies and the amenity spaces associated with that multifamily residential building. But then we also do a lot of work for our academic work, where we actually do a lot of custom designed furniture as well. We take pride in our sustainability efforts in terms of whatever we worked on. It doesn't matter sort of the exterior character of a building. We think that it all should be sustainable, down to sort of even just not only the mechanical systems, but in terms of the materials that we use, something that will stand the test of time. Even that can be thought of as sort of a sustainable approach. And then how we work. Oops, let me go back. So you'll see here various ways in which we interact in the office. We've actually had a few virtual happy hours just with the various team and groups that we have at Ramsey. After a lecture that I was mentioning, we have our happy hours. We go out. This is actually a photograph of our 16th floor terrace. You'll see Bob Stern right here in the blue blazer, surrounded by all those, and just, again, very approachable and talking after these events. It's really something that we strive for. In the upper right is our running clubs. We have quite a few different clubs, and we were running for a cause there. And, you know, we have the Ramsey Idea Committee, which I'm part of, which is Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Alliance. We have Q+. We have the Women's Initiative, Women's Leadership Initiative, the WLI, and we have our sustainability group. So we have quite a few. We also have a soccer team. So the list goes on and on. I think we find a way to really get ourselves together and have a bit of camaraderie outside of the day-to-day work. But while we're doing the day-to-day work, on the bottom right, you'll see we have this room that we call the war room space, where we get together, and it's very much like studio, where you pin up your drawings, you have a workspace, a dedicated workspace, and you lay out. You see, we all come together literally around the table and offer up suggestions. Here's where you do it. What do you think of this? And why don't we try that? And so it's very collaborative in that way. And I think that actually sort of rounds up a lot about how we work at Ramsey. So I hope that answers your question, Alana.
It does. Thank you so much. It was great to know more about you guys.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. That was incredible, Galen and Alana. Really, really well done. It was amazing to kind of see really just the different aspects of interviewing at sort of interplay there, from sharing your work in the beginning to Galen responding to the work and commenting, then also asking some questions about your work history and background, about your involvement in notable professional associations. And then also I thought, you know, the questions that you asked Alana to learn more about Ramsey were also, you know, terrific questions, and obviously Galen's insight was perfectly said and perfectly done. So that was just amazingly well done. And I know that everybody who watched and listened to that gained a lot from it. So thank you both. And with that,
Scott.
Thank you, Galen. I appreciate it. And thank you, Alana, too. So with that, we've got one mock interview down and one more to go. So that leads us to our next mock interview team, and that is going to be Alexandra and Isa. So with that, I will let you both take it away. And really quickly before you begin, sorry to do this, and I should have mentioned this before, for all of our, it looks like you're all ahead of me, but for all of our non-mock interviewing participants, those who are not mock interviewing right this second, we're just going to shield up and mute up to make sure that all of the spotlight and focus is on you. So thanks again, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Scott. So I'm going to provide a little bit of framing because I think a museum position or career is maybe shrouded in a little bit more mystery. And I want to kind of provide, you know, some framing and context for what we are interviewing for right now. So as many of you know, there are a variety of fields within museums that each have very specific qualifications that might each require different kinds of advanced degrees or experience. For example, rather than a portfolio, like Alana's amazing portfolio that she shared here, a curatorial position might look at a writing sample or a research portfolio. And we're gonna skip some of those details here, but the position that we're going to be keeping in mind for this, this mock interview is one that's kind of modeled after a position that we have at the museum called the Nancy Prophet Fellowship, combined with some elements of similar post-baccalaureate positions for students who maybe aren't entirely selecting already a career, but are trying to explore careers within museums. So maybe a 1 or a 2-year position that's meant for someone without significant prior experience, but with demonstrated interest, and maybe preparing someone for a transition to a graduate program that might then prepare them for something else. So this pretend position is a little bit of curatorial work and a little bit of education work at the museum. So with that, I will stop talking and launch in, so I can hear from Isa. So Isa, I know from your resume that you have had a curatorial experience at a local gallery. So I'm really interested in hearing what interests you about museums, specifically about this interdepartmental position at the RISD Museum, and then thinking a little bit bigger, what you envision for the future of museums.
Yeah, absolutely. I have had experience here locally in Rhode Island with Katie Tompkin projects on her Memorial Sloan Kettering permanent installation at the hospital in New York. And I witnessed during that my first kind of professional curatorial experience, I witnessed and participated in reaching out to artists, cataloging works, handling works. And I think my biggest takeaway from that experience was watching Katie select artists and specific works that flowed naturally together and set the atmosphere for specific rooms in this kind of installation space. And since then, I've been really interested in curating shows or understanding how to curate shows that bring together work harmoniously with the intention of kind of immediacy in creating these spaces. And in kind of that experience, transferring that to museum positions, I've read a lot and talked to a lot of curators in these kind of areas who work within certain parts of the museums. And I've always been fascinated in so many of them, from performance to painting to sculpture. And I think that the thing that really drew me to this position was that this RISD Museum Position Fellowship does provide an interdisciplinary, interdepartmental kind of prospect of this. And I believe that gaining knowledge surrounding multiple departments within the museum will become a strength in curating interdisciplinary exhibitions, having kind of that knowledge to work with and be fluid with other curators and other members of the museum. And I think that goes into kind of what I would envision for future museums, which is, as I am interested in creating shows that are cohesive and immediate in response to our communities, I envision museums becoming more immediate in the future, working interdisciplinary with many people within the community, not only, but also within the museum, and working with specialized curators as well as kind of more broad working curators.
That's really wonderful. Thank you so much. And I really want to, emphasize what you're saying about, responsive curating, which is something that museums are thinking a lot about right now. That's also something we think a lot about in education. And my next question is focused a little bit more on that educational role. I wonder if you can share a meaningful experience you've had with a work of art or any kind of object, absolutely does not need to be in a museum, and thinking about how you might facilitate an experience between that object and the ideas that it raises and human beings, a hypothetical audience of your choosing.
I think that the first thing that comes to mind for me is an artist book called Tattoo by Martha Hall. This was an object that I came into contact with in special collections in a museum, and it became very, very important to me. It's an artist book containing a dialogue from the artist about her experiences with tattoos and people in her life who have them. And it's this small scale accordion style book that when you flip over, her words become more weighted, and it becomes a story about a tattoo being from cancer radiation therapy. And I was always pulled by the weight of this small, beautifully created artist object. And if I were to facilitate an experience with this object and an audience, I would want to show this kind of weighted object in a way that is not just inviting, but allows for the individual to almost connect more with the piece, kind of taking its weight and maybe creating an environment. I think back to Chris O'Feely's Night and Day solo show at the Aspen Art Museum, where he had murals on the walls that really complemented the work and kind of took this space and reinvented it into a more approachable environment for the public. And I think that for works such as this, which are categorized under the theme of illness or well-being, having that kind of space and curating that kind of space for an individual who might come into this museum to feel the weight of this object, I'm really interested in facilitating the environment that makes it more approachable and that will stay with the viewer long after they've left the museum.
That's absolutely a goal. Switching gears a little bit, can you describe an experience of working on a particularly challenging project? Kind of how did you work through challenges and what did you take away from that experience?
Absolutely. I think it was 4 years back. In the past, I worked with the Maine Audubon Society. And I worked with them to curate a show of my peers' work, as well as my own, with the topics of ecology and sustainability. At this point, I knew very, very little of curatorial practices or working with an institution or a nonprofit or an organization. And I had this role to fulfill, which was to curate a cohesive and inclusive show that also valued the organization's values and morals and their ideologies, as well as also understanding where the artists were coming from and working with both of those kind of groups. We had a very limited space. It was a small room in the Audubon Center, but we had about 23 artist books that we had to showcase, as well as some large paperworks for the wall. And I had never hung an exhibition before, but I was so very excited to do this. I really loved the Maine Audubon Society, and I was so super excited to kind of merge these two worlds. But as I was kind of going through my research and talking to people, I realized that I didn't know a lot of what I would have to do to make this show successful. So I ended up every day taking my time talking to a lot of the forefront individuals who were running this exhibition with me, talking to the nonprofit individuals who were from the Maine Audubon Society, but also connecting to pretty much all of the artists who were in the show as well, and trying to learn what they wanted for the show, what they wanted for their work. And I made a lot of gallery mock-ups. I kind of built them out of cardboard, if you will, really trying to understand how to take these works and take the values of this nonprofit and showcase them in a way that it would be resounding and responsive to the work around them, not just as the work alone by themselves. And I just learned that through talking with everybody and taking more time than initially thought, but going the extra mile to talk to people who may not have known that this exhibition was happening, but talking to an ecologist or an individual like that within this organization would actually help make the show a much bigger success, as all of that knowledge kind of culminated in a show that was quite cohesive.
Thank you for sharing. That's a really great example. And I think the way that you're describing bringing together concept and content and your research process through having to, think about and problem solve in the moment with the logistics, that is really representative of a lot of museum work, definitely of curatorial work. And I appreciate the way that you described being able to do that through slowing down and collaborating. I was interested in asking a question about collaboration, but I think you actually just answered that question as well in talking about collaborating with different stakeholders and how you were kind of processing all of those ideas. So I want to give you some time for questions as well. So I'm gonna ask one more question, which is maybe a little bit bigger picture. How do you hope this experience will contribute to your growth and development and future goals? Kind of what do you want to learn from it? And also, how do you see yourself contributing to the museum during this time?
Absolutely. I think when thinking of this position, I'm hoping that knowledge of curatorial practices within a museum institution and kind of working together with multiple departments, but also allow me the opportunity to truly begin understanding works of art within a museum setting, whether that's acquisitions or preservations or methods of showcasing work, and building a relationship with the museum and its community that it inhabits. And I'm really, as I've mentioned previously, really excited and interested in the interdisciplinary nature of this program, as I believe it fosters a wide understanding of the multifaceted museum structure. And my interests lie deeply with kind of experiential curation and community engagement within the arts. And I think that I've had a lot of experience in communication, and I value attention to detail and the dedication to that attention to detail. And I've collaborated with many individuals and believe myself to be a skilled collaborator. So I'm so very excited to bring to the table kind of my communication skills and work with the many different people and many different departments in the RISD Museum. I value working thoroughly both with others and independently on projects, and I'm excited to potentially see how that plays out with the RISD Museum and what projects we work on. And I'm excited to apply my skill sets and gain more knowledge at the RISD thing. I think this is an absolutely wonderful opportunity for individuals such as myself who are just graduated students.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Do you have any questions for me about the museum or about work at the museum?
I do have one, especially considering that we are still currently in COVID. I was just wondering what the experience of a participant of this position, what their kind of day would look like in this program, granted still we are under COVID restriction.
Yeah, that's a great question. So this position, because it is housed in multiple departments, kind of switches between departments. So this is something where a fellow might work for 2 days a week in education and 3 days a week in curatorial. And you know, that means a little bit more of like switching back and forth, working on balancing multiple projects at once. But it also means, you know, gaining this like broad grounding. So right now, that looks like every day is a little bit different. And I think that is true always in both of those museum fields. Some days are spent engaging with people in the galleries. Others are spent sitting in the library and doing research, and many days are spent answering emails. So there's a lot of variety. I will also say that right now, we are working remotely. Almost all of the museum staff is working remotely, but we hope to shift slowly back to in-person into next year. So we have onboarded a couple of new staff during this time, and they are bearing with us in the remote work experience. So we feel confident that someone coming into the museum at this moment is going to be able to really fully engage in all of the work that we are continuing to do right now, but then also have a little bit more of a typical experience soon enough.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Great. Well, thank you, Isa and Alexandra. That was another amazing mock interview installment. And what I really liked, really in the kind of juxtaposition of the two interviews that we had tonight, the first with a little bit more of an emphasis on, showing some visual work, but this one more of a Q&A style. And that, I think it was really great that we were able to show that and show both, because as Alexandra knows, there are certain segments within the art and design world, and museum work is certainly one of them, where you may not be, showing your work as part of the interview. And it is more of a discussion of your background, your experience, and sort of your perspectives on the museum world and the world of cultural organizations, kind of related to the very first question you asked. So I think that it was really great that we kind of got to see those two different kinds of interviews tonight. So thank you both very, very much for doing that. And now we've reached the point in the night, and all of our participants now can feel free to kind of raise their shields, so to speak. You can put your cameras back on. And we definitely welcome questions from the audience at this stage, and we will take those questions and field them to the group. So if you have questions about what you saw, what the experience seemed like to you as a viewer, questions about interviewing in general that you'd like to ask and sort of get insight from our two employers on, all of that is fair game. So feel free to submit your questions. It looks like we do have a few coming in already, so that's great. So this one is a question from Meridula, and I'm just gonna vocalize it for them. This looks specific to our architecture and interior architecture tandem. So Galen and Alana, the question is, I have a question specific to architectural interviews. How long in minutes would you suggest we can spend on presenting work or portfolio pieces in, say, a 1-hour interview, with the concern of holding the attention span of the interviewer? So do you have any kind of tips on, the timeline for that kind of a part of an interview?
I'd say Alana and I think we met right at the half an hour mark with everything that we went through. But again, it wasn't her full portfolio. She very poignantly selected a few things that she wanted to show. And I think that's also very good. But what I would say is a rough estimate, rule of thumb, I think is 25 minutes. And what I say is that is to very specifically pick, instead of going through your full, because some people have really extensive and long, instead of going through each project, like pick a few key projects, I would say, both in your professional work that you may have as an internship or working professionally before grad school, as well as your academic work, because typically we want to see both. And for those, I'd say that I've interviewed several where they only show one, whether it's all academic and no professional, and understanding if you're just coming out of school, that might be the case. And so we understand that. But for those that have had work before and have had internship, it's always good to show a balance of your academic work as well as your professional work. And so picking a key few projects that showed maybe a variety of different things that you've worked on, or a variety of different projects that you've focused on, whether it be a group project in school as well as solo work, that is the kind of thing I think you want to give a good variety of an overall general way of sort of attacking things and what you've done that helps us understand, oh, they can work in such and such in a group setting. Oh, they're very strong as well, autonomously. And oh, they also love to hand sketch, which we love, or whatever, or they're extremely talented in digital world and realm and coding, for example. We want to know that too. So I think picking a little variety of things is a good way to start. And 25 minutes or so is a good round sort of way to think about things, to then engage the others. You want to engage your interviewer as well. I don't know your thoughts.
I think that just keeping in mind that not every project needs to show the exact same thing. So you don't need to show every project like a mood board or every single project, a collage or a physical model. So the narrative kind of has a little like diversity. So you're not saying the same thing about every single project. That helps. And I kind of have a rule of thumb of like 20 pages could just feel that's comfortable enough. And then I also have drafts of my portfolio that are longer with like 4 projects and then a couple that are 2 projects, just so I can have a different target for each experience. So just curating your idea just so you have a cohesive narrative of what you want to represent. Maybe it's more important than the amount of pages.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think one of our next questions sort of relates to that idea and the point that you were both making about kind of creating a cohesive portfolio experience and also curating to really kind of focus in on target in on specific projects. But Esther asks, just as I think a follow-up, when presenting your portfolio, is there a recommended number of projects you could present? So it's a similar kind of question, but do you, either of you have any insight on that, kind of building off of what you've already said?
Yeah, I could just tell from experience. I have one portfolio that I have 4 projects, one being a group project and 2 being completed from undergrad and 1 under development. But I normally, when presenting and talking, I only use 2 projects because I think those are the ones that best represent my idea. I'm also working like having a website with like some supportive material or just my photography and embroidery that I might not communicate during an interview, but I think it'd be interesting for someone to know those interests. So I just always had like 2 portfolios, and I think it's been working really well in terms of how to communicate my ideas.
Yeah. Kaylin, any thoughts on that?
Well, I'd say, having an approach is good. And I love what Alana's saying in terms of having a more shorter, abridged version of your portfolio and having a more extended version. I think, and what I've seen is what I like to tell some of our colleagues to do when they're sort of basically going out to career fairs and sort of giving input to, those that are still in school, is to really, again, put up front a good variety of 2 to 3 projects, feeling comfortable that they're strong, they represent your methodology, your thought process, and all of that graphically strong, and talk through those. But also you might have and say, well, I do have others that I can show you that if you want to, and then those that are on the interview can say, oh, well, okay, well, what else do you have? And well, I also have a competition that I recently completed with a partner, and you can talk to that. So I think giving them the opportunity to also look for what else you might have, but put up front the things that okay, this speaks about who I am and what I.
Yeah, no, that's a great thought. I think both of you are kind of speaking to flexibility, right? Having flexibility in what you show, whether that's Alana's point about, 2 slightly different versions, one longer, one a little bit more targeted, or, having Galen, a similar idea, your top 2 to 3, but then you have other options for things you can show that show different skill sets or more depth or what have you. So yeah, I think those are terrific suggestions. Next question from Marisa is more general, so we can open this up to all of our participants. But after the interview, is it a good idea to send a thank you note to the interviewer? Thoughts on that? Whoever would like to jump in, please.
Yes.
Yes. I'm honestly a little bit surprised by how infrequently we receive those, because our amazing Career Center has guides that instruct you to do so. And it really does mean something in terms of reflecting back, your appreciation of time, that you're still thinking about the conversation, maybe a day later. It is meaningful.
Thank you for the plug. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I welcome more answers to that question for sure, but I will send in the chat. In fact, we do have a section of our website dedicated to interview preparation, and even with some sample questions that you can expect. So I will send that in the chat for everybody's awareness, but I appreciate that plug, Alexandra, because we definitely do talk about the value of follow-up and thank you. But yeah, sorry, go ahead, Galen, by all means.
Alexandra, I think that's like, spot on. And I think what that thank you allows you to do is to, again, keep that conversation going, just keep in contact, and follow up is so very important. And what I can say is that sort of represents how you might even perform once you're hired. Yes, it's all about follow-up as well, because you can be the best designer and everything else, and if you don't follow up, then what happens? It falls through. So that's sort of the first step in your interaction with someone that says, oh, okay, well, I'm grateful, I'm thankful for that interview, that opportunity. Whether or not you're hired, you keep in contact and you've had that, and it allows them to say, oh, they're actually serious about this. Oh, they actually care about this. And so I think it's always a good practice.
Isa or Alana, any thoughts on that? Not to put you on the spot, but if you, from the student perspective, if you want to offer some thoughts, by all means.
Absolutely. I think in my experience, I've always kind of reached out to individuals after interviews, and I think the feedback is always positive, and they always express gratitude to that. And I think they are definitely the contacts who keep kind of in touch with you when you reach out to them. In my earlier time, before I kind of knew to do that, I wouldn't get nearly as many long-term mentors even, or individuals who would kind of talk to you once again. But I think it creates, as you were saying, like a great understanding of also kind of your dedication to a role or to communication that really helps potential employers or mentors kind of stay in touch with you, but also understand that their time has been valued and taken seriously.
I also agree. It also gives you the opportunity. Sometimes the person that scheduled the interview is not the one that's interviewing you. So you have like a direct email with that person that you actually talked about or talked with. So maintaining that like line of connection is something I think it's really important and valued, and just make it like as personal as possible. If you can remember something you talked about, I think that's highly appreciated. I tend normally to include a question just to keep the conversation moving and showing my interest.
Absolutely. Terrific answers all the way around. Next question, if people are ready. Is it common for employers to prepare presentations about their firm culture when doing interviews? So I think kind of referencing, Galen, what you had shared about Ramsa there. Is that a common practice in interviews, or is that something that students should expect?
It depends. It depends. And again, I would say probably not. But as again, we've been doing quite a few interviews, we found it really useful and helpful to us when people ask about, well, as Alana did, how's the culture at Ramsa? And what do you guys do? How is that interaction between, teams and just office culture in general? And I think the best way to do that, again, picture's worth 1,000 words, I think is to say a little bit about what we do, but then also when we get together, we work really hard, but we play really hard. We do have a wonderful series of lectures and people talking about the projects they're working on. We have lunch and learns. So it's nice to actually, and we do often talk about that in depth at interviews. So we started thinking, well, maybe we should put together a little slide and have that. So when people do ask, we can not only just talk about it, we can show them. So I think that's how it came about. Is it done typically? I'd say probably not. But again, we continue and we work and we want to grow even ourselves. But how can we improve how we speak about where we work and how much we enjoy what we do and how it's like to be there, is to sort of show that and discuss it. I think it's been received well. Is it always done? I would say no, but it's something that we've started doing just recently in response to those asking us questions.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great point. And I would also say, it's a great sign as well. You know, the fact that you had that prepared and that's something that you've built into your interview structure does show that, you know, RAMS is being responsive to like, hey, we're receiving this question. It's clearly something people care about. So why don't we help them better understand our culture? And obviously that's going to be good for everybody, right? That's going to be good for the person you're interviewing because they're going to get a better answer to their question. And it's also going to hopefully, you know, entice people to want to join the team, right? And that's the whole idea. Right. So yeah, I totally, like, I think that answer was just 100% spot on from my experience and my knowledge. And I think your point about how it grew out of a very common question. So I think that that topic of like, what's your company culture like, or tell me what it's like to work at company X, that's incredibly common as part of an interview. Right. But the presentation may not be, but it's a terrific thing. And I honestly wish more companies would do it. I think it's really helpful.
Great question. Thanks for that, whoever asked. Yeah.
It was terrific. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the name. That was my mistake. I apologize, but whoever that was out there, great question. And so I'm sorry about that. Any other thoughts on that one before we move on? Feeling good?
I would just echo that that's a question that I hear a lot, less in terms of like company culture and working in nonprofits, but in terms of kind of what do you appreciate about working in this specific institution? And that is not something I thought about doing, but it is something that I think is really valuable. And I loved seeing that in your interview, Galen. So just echoing that that is a common question and a good question to ask.
Question.
Totally agree. Thanks, Alexandra. Appreciate that. I really love this question from Han Qing. Will interviewers always be as kind as you all were, and how to deal with the stress of an interview with a group of interviewers or a group interview kind of scenario where it's you and multiple people at once, which does happen sometimes. Any tips on that, and just kind of how to deal with the stress of interviewing in general, I think would be a great way to answer this one. Anybody feel free to answer.
I'm going to jump in and I'd love to hear from others. Isa, Alexandra, Alana. I think just being prepared is the best way in which to help quell some of those nerves, and we all get nervous. But I think once you've actually had a little run through yourself, time yourself, go through a little bit of a script, but not be scripted on the day. But if you do that in advance, it just helps organize your thoughts. Even if it's not a full script, it's just like little bullet points. I do that all the time for talking points. I think that's extremely helpful, and it helps prepare you, and you won't not believe how much of a difference it makes on the day of that you've actually sort of ran through it a bit. And it just gives you like, you know what, I'm going to talk about what I do and what I've done because I feel confident in it. And I think having that little bit of preparation time allows you to feel good about what you are about to present and take someone through.
Totally concur. And something I talk about with students in advising meetings all the time. So very, very nice to hear that echoed from the employer perspective. I appreciate hearing that. Other thoughts too?
I agree. I think no one knows about your process and work as much as you do. So just keep that in mind. Like there's no right or wrong answer. Knowing exactly what you're applying for and what is important about that firm. I think doing that research also gives you like some sort of confidence. I also think when creating a portfolio, what I did, and I thought it was extremely helpful for this round because I probably redesigned my portfolio 100 times. Just the idea of each page has a message. So there's no just pretty image. Everything communicates something of my design or my intent. So understanding that each page should be important and what that pinpoints. So when you're talking about it, you know exactly why it's there and what you're trying to communicate helps in when creating those bullet points, and also helps like the question before the narrative and like being cohesive and diverse at the same time. So a couple of background stuff doing before, like research and understanding what you're presenting will help when creating the portfolio, but also in interviews. Not everybody is as nice, but I just think you need to put up the face of like, this is my work, I'm proud and confident, and hopefully it's a match, and just trying to create that connection.
Well said. Any other thoughts from the rest of our crew?
Yeah, I think I would echo preparation. And I saw another question that just came in that I feel like I'm also answering right now too.
Sure.
So I think that preparation looks different for everyone, right? So for this interview and for our preparation, like, we talked in advance, but even without that, you are able to think about and do research on what kinds of questions you might be asked, and be able to prep in whatever way you need to prep. For me, that often looks like writing something down so that I know that I am not going to completely forget something. Just that act of writing it down helps me in a moment of stress. And this is something that I experience a lot, not through interviewing, but through presenting and through facilitating conversations with public audiences. And for me, that's writing. For somebody else, it might be practicing with a roommate ahead of time. And for someone else, it might be something completely different. But doing that prep for yourself is number one. I would say the other thing I want to echo is prepping around the organization that you're interviewing with. It is so easy to look at someone's website, to pick up a couple of really interesting projects or exhibitions or works that someone has made that you are interested in, and be able to reference those. And that indicates a level of interest that is really, really strong as part of an interview, but then it also helps you prepare, right? That means that you are prepared to answer their questions. And the last thing I want to add is, in terms of being really nervous in a moment, and I want to acknowledge that like pretend position that I just interviewed Issa for probably would have been 4 people, like not just me. And so that is a real concern, and I totally understand how stressful that is. One thing I want to emphasize is that the moment of silence that is echoing in your head and feels like it's 30 seconds long is not. It's 2 seconds long. And you can take 2 seconds or 10 seconds and think about what you want to say and collect your thoughts, and it will be fine. And that will be really helpful. And no one is going to, I don't know, at least from my perspective, no one's going to judge you for that. It's gonna be beneficial for everyone, rather than feeling like I need to come up with the perfect sentence in a half a second. It's something so minor and practical, but I think it's really important, being comfortable with a little bit of silence and being able to prepare yourself.
I think it's such a great point, Alexandra. And as you noted, it does connect to one of the questions that just came in, which is this idea of, if I'm a little, worried that I'm not a naturally good speaker or presenter, what are some tips that I can take to help prepare better? And I think your point about, we've talked about just the power of preparation in general and how that sort of breeds confidence going into it. And I think that's 100% true. But also your point about kind of just taking a moment, centering yourself, giving yourself time to breathe, and just slowing down. I know that I tend to be a fast speaker. You probably caught it a few times tonight. and I even tell myself that, interviewing or not interviewing, to slow down and, take a breath. Because in my mind, it feels like I'm like, talking really slowly, but in reality, it's not. In reality, it comes across really, it's better if I slow down. So that would be I would echo that advice that Alexandra gave, which is just to kind of breathe, take a moment, slow down if you need it. And it will, it's not as bad as you think, and it will actually turn out better than you expect if you do that. And that will help you in the process and in the moment. So I think that's a good point, but thank you. And
Bravo, Alexandra, that was great. I completely agree and concur with that. Just take a deep breath and you got it. And so I love that. I love.
Any other thoughts on that? It doesn't have to be, but if any of our students want to offer insight there, that I think that'll be our last question. So kind of a final thought if you want to offer it.
Yeah, just to pitch in here, I echo everything, you know, Alana, Galen, and Alexandra have said. And I know to say it for a third time, but that moment of silence is such like a special place for an interviewee. Just to like, it could be even a breathing exercise sometimes, especially if you're anxious. I've had instances where, you know, maybe I'm not even thinking during that silence, but it just gives me a second to reset from the previous question. And it's like never underestimated. It's always been helpful. And I would say something else is upon the research done for your potential employer or the interviewer, which is so like important and helpful just for yourself. I would say that also kind of reading over your resume again before you go into an interview sometimes helps, because you never know what they're going to pull from your interview, from your resume. I mean, like we had a question about my past curatorial experience, and so they can always pull from that. And I've found that to be helpful over the past, or like any materials you've kind of sent in to a potential employer, going over that as well as researching the employer is always, it's just one extra thing that you can do before that like doesn't have to create anxiety during the event.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, Isa. And just building off of that, like one of the things when I'm talking with students sometimes about interview prep is like literally do a side by side, right, of like your resume, and then if you have it, the job or internship description, and try to connect the dots, try to find parallels between what they're seeking and what you have already done. It sounds so simplistic, and some people may instinctually do that, but it is a simple task. But Galen was talking about like just that day of kind of like getting the mindset right, and that can kind of help you even just visually, draw those connections for yourself and just be even better equipped to talk about your own experiences. So I think your point, Isa, about going over what you've already sent, reacquainting yourself, like it feels like you should know it. It's like, oh, it's my resume, of course I know it, or these are my experiences, of course I know it, and that's true. But it's still helpful to kind of go through the extra step of thinking about how you want to talk about them and kind of revisiting how you would explain those experiences and talk about them. So I think it's such a good point.
I have one other thing to add
All
before we
means.
close.
Yeah.
And I think, I think it was a really wonderful question. And I can tell you that everything takes just a little bit of practice, and not everyone is a naturally great speaker. You actually don't know that the people that are actually great speakers practice and practice really, really hard before they finally got there. So it is possible for everyone. And it just takes a little bit of time and effort, and may take a little more time for others than some, but that's okay. And so I've seen people that maybe started out pretty good, but how much better they are. And I've seen people that have not started out so good and are extremely good now. And so I just know for a fact, and it was great for me to see that progression and how they've sort of grown in that something that was really hard for them, that they said, you know what, I'm going to tackle this. I'm really going to practice hard at presenting. And they did it. So I say it's accessible for all. Fantastic question. You can all achieve it. It takes a little bit of work like everything else, and you can get there.
I mean, that's again, cheers to that. That was, I think, such a positive note for us to end on, and I think such a great point. And again, I totally 100% agree. So with that, I want to just thank every single one of you. These were amazing interviews. Everybody who was here tonight in the audience, I think, learned so much. And I mean, as I said, before we began tonight, we could not do this without you. So thank you all. Thank you, Galen. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Isa. Thank you, Alana. Interviewing is hard enough, and to do it in front of an audience of people is even harder. So thank you all for putting yourselves out there and being willing to do this. again, it was just such an amazing experience. I want to thank everybody who attended tonight as well. And with that, I think I will bid everyone adieu and take care. And if you need any assistance or want to reach out to the RISD Career Center for any reason at all, you can always feel free to email us at risdcareers@risd.edu. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.